Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode. And today I'll be talking about Africa. That's right. We are taking a trip across the big pond to talk about Africa, specifically the role that Africa has played throughout world history, how it's affected our world today, and how it will affect our world tomorrow. Let's get into it. Africa is vast. It is home to over 1.4 billion people, and it's covered nearly 30,000 kilometers squared. To put that into context, Africa is almost twice the size of the United States. Additionally, Africa is home to around 3,000 languages, with 4 official languages being Arabic, English, French, and Portuguese. There are many different regions within Africa, and all of them have their own unique histories, cultures, and characteristics. But to get this conversation going, I wanted to highlight just a few things about Africa and Africans that are not commonly known and need to be talked about more. So let's start off by debunking the myth that Africa is somehow disconnected from the rest of the world. This is a narrative that only paints Africa as a place where Europeans went to colonize and pillage natural resources. But Africa was already an interconnected continent before any European had set foot in it. If anything, Europe was on the periphery of Africa and the rest of Eurasia. The Sahara was too large of a barrier for trans-European trade. So all of the gold and salt from West Africa could not reach the Mediterranean without traveling through North Africa. This is why we see cities like Timbuktu and Cairo become the hubs of intellectualism and trade during this period. However, when the Sahara became more traversable due to technological advancements, sub-Saharan Africa became much more interconnected with the rest of the world. Between the 1400s and 1800s, sub-Saharan Africa saw the rise of empires like the Songhai Empire, which stretched from the Atlantic Ocean to modern-day Cameroon. In the same period, we also see the Kingdom of Congo rise to power, whose king even corresponded with the King of Portugal, asking for missionaries and schools rather than gold and ivory. And it wasn't only land-based trade that Africa participated in. Africa was actually one of the most integral parts of the transatlantic trade. Most historians don't like to mention this because it doesn't fit into the narrative of Africa being plundered by Europeans. But the truth is that if it weren't for Africa, the Americas would not have developed the way they did. The Caribbean in particular was built on the backs of Africans who were taken from their homeland under duress. But the cultural impact that these Africans had on the islands is immeasurable. Jamaica, for example, is widely recognized as being the birthplace of reggae music, which spread to other parts of the world and continues to be influential to this day. Or take Senegal and Haiti, for instance, both of which have very similar cultures and languages despite being separated by the entire ocean. Brazil is also heavily influenced by Africa, and if you look at their flag, you can see a clear representation of its heritage. The Afro-Brazilian population has always been very active in politics, business, and culture. In fact, Brazil's first president was an Afro-Brazilian man named Deodoro da Fonseca. In the end, Africa's involvement in the Americas is so great that it would take several videos to cover everything I would like to discuss, so I may come back to it in the future. For now, though, I want to bring the conversation back to Africa itself and what the future holds for the continent. As I mentioned earlier, Africa is huge. It's home to hundreds of millions of people and thousands of businesses. By some estimates, Africa is expected to be home to over 2 billion people by the year 2100. And according to the IMF, Africa will be the second fastest growing region in the world behind Asia. By 2100, Africa will have a booming population of young people, a growing economy, and tremendous amounts of wealth. There's no doubt that Africa will be a major player on the world stage by the end of the century. And organizations like the African Union are working hard to ensure that Africa is ready for this future. The African Union is a group comprised of all African nations except Morocco. Its goal is to promote unity and solidarity between African countries and to coordinate their efforts to address common challenges. The AU was formed in 1963, but it took some time to gain traction. Many African countries were still dealing with the aftermath of colonialism, and the Cold War made it difficult for them to cooperate. However, since the end of the Cold War, the AU has become more active and has made significant progress towards its goals. In 2007, for example, the AU launched a new partnership for Africa's development, also known as NEPAD. NEPAD is a program designed to help Africa solve some of its biggest problems, including poverty, disease, and lack of infrastructure. It's funded by the African Union and its member states, as well as by international partners like the UN and the World Bank. NEPAD has helped to improve infrastructure in Africa and to boost economic growth. It's also funded projects to improve healthcare and education, as well as to promote peace and security. The African Union has also been working to resolve conflicts in Africa. The AU has deployed peacekeepers to areas where there is conflict and has worked to mediate peace agreements. It's also created the African Court on Human and People's Rights, which is tasked with protecting human rights in Africa. Despite these successes, the AU still faces many challenges. One of the biggest challenges is getting African countries to work together. As I mentioned earlier, many African countries are still dealing with the effects of colonialism, and there is often tension between them. Additionally, the AU is underfunded and doesn't have the resources to effectively deal with the challenges facing Africa. Finally, the AU is often slow to respond to crises. By the time the AU deploys peacekeepers to an area where there is conflict, the situation has often already deteriorated significantly. Despite these challenges, the AU is an important organization that is playing a vital role in Africa's development. The African Union has the potential to be a driving force for positive change in Africa. With its focus on unity, development, and peace, the AU is helping to create a better future for all Africans. So, what do you think? How do you think Africa would develop in the future? Do you think the African Union will be successful in its goals? Let me know your thoughts down below. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please be sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you want to see more content like this. And with that said, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Thank you to our supporters for making videos like this possible. And if you want to see your name at the end of videos, then you too can support us. The link to that is in the description.